We are now talking to award-winning SB Nation NFL and college football writer Jason Hirschhorn. What's going on, Jason?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. How's it going?
Well, we're getting over COVID. I'm breathing. I'm actually getting some kind of taste. I had to get a Slurpee, okay, because I needed something sour, and I need to get some kind of taste back. And this is like a nerdy, sour taste, so I'm trying to slowly ease my taste back in. But I'm feeling a little bit better. I have a little bit more energy. Hopefully I last this 3-hour show, but we're very happy to have you on. How are you feeling? How's everything going over there where you are?
Well, I am fortunate to not have COVID, and I am happy that you have made, at least thus far, a pretty speedy recovery. It's not fun. I have plenty of friends who have gotten it, and even the best case scenarios are still nothing close to ideal.
Oh, my God. I wanted to kill myself. I actually wanted to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge. I had the opportunity the other day, but I didn't. I was telling Speedy. Speedy actually had the vaccination, so he didn't have it as bad as me. But all three of us got it, and we both, me and Tyler had it at the worst point, but I think I had it the worst. So I had every symptom but the sore throat. It was horrible. But let's get into some sports with you. What is your thoughts right now, early in the NFL season? First, with the New York sports, what are your thoughts with Zach Wilson and the growth of what we've seen so far in the first 4 weeks? And then Daniel Jones. This is his third full season, and a lot of Giant fans are ready to throw him under the bus and run him over with a bus. What are your thoughts with Daniel Jones?
Well, actually, I'll start with Zach Wilson and more globally that Jets offense. You had mentioned earlier, or at the top, that Mike LaFleur, the younger brother of Matt LaFleur, hasn't hit the ground running as the offensive coordinator and play caller. And to a certain degree, I don't think that's surprising, and I don't think that's necessarily even a commentary on Mike LaFleur, because if you look at a lot of those offensive coaches that are running some variation of the Kyle Shanahan offense, it usually takes a while to get going, even with fully veteran quarterbacks. You look at Matt Ryan, when Kyle Shanahan was the offensive coordinator there in 2015, it was slow going. And then in 2016, it exploded. You look at Green Bay. In 2019, it was a pretty efficient offense, but it wasn't decidedly better than that last season with Mike McCarthy. And then in 2020, it becomes the best offense in the NFL statistically. So you see a lot of those jumps in that second year, because even though that offense is not super complicated, it's not they're running, 25 different play concepts. It's shorter than that. There are different formations. They'll have motions that go along with it, but it's getting a lot of reps, and more importantly, those live reps in that offense that really pushes it to the next level. So while the Jets and Zach Wilson have, over the course of the first 4 games of the season, not looked super great. Obviously, Zach Wilson looked a little better this past weekend. I think as you get closer to the end of the season, and more importantly, next season, that's when you're going to see that jump. And it's not just because Zach Wilson will get more experience in the NFL full stop. It's because that's when that offensive line is going to be better. Blocking for that outside zone, it's a very big component of that offense. So you're going to be able to run more effectively those deep shots off of play action off those wide zone runs. And then when all those things come together, when you marry the pass and the run, which, again, those offenses have done a really good job of across the NFL, that's when I think you're going to see that offense really reach that full potential.
So regarding Daniel Jones, I think Daniel Jones definitely had 2 great games so far that you look at this season. Even his third game, even though they lost, and he wasn't great statistically against the Falcons, he was very good. Now, what do you think of his projections for the rest of the year? Like, what do you think of him as a quarterback as a whole, both statistically and skill-wise too? And if he does have a good season, like this current pace with the Giants, do you think they'll pay him? And if so, what do you think his value is?
Well, it is very hard to judge Daniel Jones, not just because it's only been 4 weeks of the season, but because I don't know that his offense is actually doing that much to help him. If you look at what most of the best offenses in the NFL do, it's a lot of play action, it's a lot of pre-snap motion, because those things really force the defense to commit or force the defense into awkward positions at the snap. The Giants do not do a lot of that. They're close to the bottom of the league in both metrics, but that offense, in terms of efficiency, has actually come close to like the middle of the league. And I think that speaks in part to what Daniel Jones has done so far this season. I think he speaks in part to some of those new components that are on the offense. Kenny Galladay just got there. They've added some pieces along the offensive line. And I know there's been injuries too, and they're adapting to those on the fly. But the offense, I feel like, because of the players, has elevated, but not because of the scheme. And that's where we get into that big Jason Garrett question, because the coaching staff, Joe Judge in particular, is talking about how they're running a lot of the same concepts that the rest of the NFL does. It's not that different. And I have a hard time with that assessment because, go look at the Arizona Cardinals, for example. That offense looks very different than what the Rams are doing. The Rams look very different than what the Giants are doing. We can, go team to team, and we can see a lot of differences. So, you could, if you're a coach, and say, oh yeah, we're running, the Yankee concept, and that's something that a lot of other teams do. And that might be true, but it's how you're stacking those plays together, how you are confusing the defense in terms of your play calls, in terms of your play action. Those are the ways in which offenses can differentiate themselves, and the Giants haven't really done that. So when you come to Daniel Jones, knowing that he's not getting that lift from the scheme, and he has been more efficient this season. He's made fewer mistakes. Turnovers have been such a big problem for him over the first few years of his career, and at least thus far, that's been less of a problem for him. Now, you want to see that obviously over a longer period of time. 4 games is not an adequate sample size. He can look great for a few weeks, and then, over the next 4, maybe look like he did in 2020 and 2019. But I do think we've seen some of that progression. I don't know if that's going to be enough to convince the Giants to extend him, simply because we don't know who's going to be making that decision for the Giants. If that team doesn't make the playoffs, we do not know if Gettleman is going to be the general manager come 2022. And if he's not the general manager, Joe Judge could be the head coach. They might not make some massive overhaul in the staff, but we don't know that either. It may come to be that the next general manager, if it's someone besides Gettleman in 2022, decides to just play it out another year and push those decisions off a little longer. And if that's the case, there's just so much more that we need to see over the course of the next 18 months.
We are talking to award-winning SB Nation, NFL, and college football writer Jason Hirschhorn. Now, Jason, when you were just talking about the Rams and obviously the Arizona Cardinals, the growth of Kyler Murray, and obviously now Matthew Stafford taking over there with the LA Rams. Is there anything that stands out to you right now in the NFC that really pops out? We all know what Matthew Stafford could bring to the table. Kyler Murray has been sensational, absolutely sensational. Is there a team that really has stood out to you so far in the last 4 weeks of the NFL season?
Well, the Cardinals kind of have to be that team, right? They're the only undefeated team left in the NFL. And if you look at that offense, I know we were just talking about it, what it's trying to do is run an NFL version of the air raid. So they're using a lot of those concepts, that tempo, a lot of static looks at the line of scrimmage. That's a team kind of like the Giants, but in different ways. They're not using a lot of pre-snap motion. They're using some play action, but they're trying to get as many plays as possible in a given game. The problem, though, and I mean, it's a problem in the sense that schematically it makes things hard for the quarterback, although it has not been that big of an issue for Kyler Murray yet, is that when he bails on pockets, whether it's because of pressure or because it's a clean pocket, and he's done a lot of both this season, the receivers and really the play design breaks down, and it becomes this sort of street ball version of offense. Now, it works because Kyler Murray is so talented. The way he can generate so much torque off balance, off platforms, because he's not even with his feet on the ground, allow for that kind of thing to work at least pretty effectively. And it has been extremely effective though thus far. But at a certain point, they're going to run to a defense that takes those, improvisational components away, and it's going to come down to how can Kliff Kingsbury, the offensive play caller and head coach of the Cardinals, how can he lift that offense? And in the few years he's been there, we haven't really seen that. The offense has not been bad, but they haven't been great. And when Kyler Murray has gotten hurt, which we saw in 2020, the whole thing has really fallen apart. So can Kyler Murray just lift that offense by virtue of his own talent? I mean, the answer is yes, at least in small doses. But we need to see it over the course of the full season, because I just don't know if that offense, the way it is designed and the way it is called, is going to make things easier for him at any point in 2021.
I want to talk about another team that's done well, especially defensively, is the Dallas Cowboys, and they had a shocker yesterday, cutting Jaylon Smith.
Why is that shock? There's no shock. They got to, obviously, Van Der Esch is going to have to be signed in the offseason. They don't have the money. They overpay every single player on the team. They get the highest paid running back, the highest paid quarterback. They have the highest paid wide receiver. They have the highest paid everything. Pass rusher. What's next? They'll have the highest paid underwear by the end of the year.
Still, though, with the defense playing as well as they have this season, which was a big surprise to a lot of people, is there any reason that this move makes a lot of sense, or do you think it was definitely one that was surprising?
I wouldn't say it's a total shock, because you can understand why they made that move. Jaylon Smith, as you guys correctly pointed out, he makes a lot of money, and he's not playing a particularly featured role at this point for that Dallas defense. Now, there are some things that he does really, really well. He's a very good run defender. I know that's devalued in the modern NFL, but there are certainly defenses that struggle in that area, and they get destroyed because of that reason. So that's part of the explanation for why the Green Bay Packers, it seems, are going to sign Jaylon Smith to assist in that run game. But for the Cowboys, they have multiple linebackers that can cover the pass, which is the number one thing any defense is going to have to do, and can at least adequately defend the run. That combination makes more sense for that defense. So Smith wasn't going to get a lot of snaps, and his role had diminished over the course of the first 4 weeks, and he's going to cost a lot of money. And remember, they can save some of that cap money even though they released him, and they can roll that over into 2022, where they and a lot of other teams are going to have cap issues. It probably makes sense. Not that Jaylon Smith is not a player capable of contributing, but it probably isn't enough to justify the money they were otherwise going to pay him.
It is very, very interesting. We are talking to award-winning SB Nation and NFL college football writer Jason Hirschhorn. Now, we talk about Sunday Night Football and obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New England Patriots. Were you surprised today that the New England Patriots were going to release Stephon Gilmore, and then all of a sudden, with the blink of an eye, they trade him for a 6th-round draft pick to the Carolina Panthers? Were you surprised that happened? Were you surprised that the Patriots couldn't get more for him?
The Patriots had kind of been telegraphing that Stephon Gilmore was not going to be a part of this team since the offseason. Gilmore wanted a new contract, which is understandable given that he was a recent Defensive Player of the Year. He's in the last year of his deal, and cornerbacks at his age oftentimes fall off very soon. He'd like to get that payday before that happens. Now, the Patriots, very cognizant of the way that cornerbacks tend to fall off, did not want to pay him, and they didn't want to boost his 2021 salary to the point where he was willing to come back. So at that point, it becomes, what can you get for him? And when you leak publicly that they're looking to move on, that they might release him, that's when you can get some of those last-ditch trade offers. Because if you're a team that feels like you're not going to be able to sign him in free agency, but you might be able to acquire him for a day 3 pick, that's the kind of move that you make at that point. That's exactly what happened with the Panthers. And it makes sense for them as well. They lost J.C. Horn to a potentially season-ending injury. Now, he's a rookie, but he was a top 10 pick. He had, up to that point of the injury, played very, very well. And it's really hard to replace someone like that. I mean, they already traded for C.J. Henderson from the Jacksonville Jaguars, but that's a player who's in his second year. He'd fallen off of favor after being a top 10 pick himself. You know, he might have a really nice second chapter with the Panthers, but it's too early to say. And either way, he was unlikely to fill the role of J.C. Horn. Gilmore can do that. And in that defense is one that depends more on man coverage than it does on zone. That's absolutely what Stephon Gilmore specializes in. So you can see the match. Gilmore, even if he ends up being, let's just say, 85% of what he was at his peak, that's an impact player for that team. And that is a defense that has played extremely well. It's off to, a statistically historic start. At least it was up until this past weekend. Throw in Gilmore, you look at the offense, it's performing, it's not one of the best offenses in the NFL, but it is a decided increase over what it was last season. That combination could not just compete for a playoff spot, it could potentially win a division if a few things break right. So you can understand why they decided to throw a 6th-round pick and get a recent Defensive Player of the Year. It just makes a lot of sense.